The Roman Empire's collapse in the 5th century plunged Western Europe into chaos and instability, ending centuries of centralized rule and ushering in the early Middle Ages. Germanic tribes, including the Franks, filled the power vacuum, establishing new kingdoms over former Roman territories, shaping the future political landscape of medieval Europe. The Franks originated as a confederation of Germanic tribes along the Rhine River, gradually expanding their influence through military conquest and alliances with local populations. Clovis I, king of the Salian Franks, united various Frankish tribes under his leadership, forming the foundation for the Merovingian dynasty that ruled much of Gaul. Clovis's conversion to Christianity around 496 CE was a pivotal moment, aligning the Franks with the powerful Roman Catholic Church and legitimizing his reign. This alliance strengthened Clovis's rule and helped spread Christianity across his kingdom, fostering unity among diverse peoples formerly under Roman control. The Merovingian kings ruled through a combination of military strength, personal loyalty, and traditional Germanic customs, often struggling to maintain centralized authority. Despite fragmentation, the Frankish kingdom grew in size and power, eventually covering much of modern-day France, Belgium, and parts of Germany. Roman administrative systems faded, replaced by localized governance under counts and dukes, who wielded significant autonomy in their regions. The decline of cities and infrastructure marked the era, with many Roman towns shrinking or being abandoned due to economic instability and population shifts. Monasteries became centers of learning and preservation, copying manuscripts and keeping literacy alive during this tumultuous period. The fusion of Roman, Christian, and Germanic traditions gradually created a distinct medieval European culture. Barbarian law codes, like the Salic law among the Franks, governed daily life, blending Roman legal concepts with tribal customs. Intertribal warfare and external threats from groups like the Saxons and Lombards defined much of the period's political dynamics. The Frankish kingdom's expansion sometimes brought it into conflict with the Byzantine Empire and other neighboring powers. Trade routes were disrupted, leading to a more localized economy based on agriculture and subsistence farming. The rural aristocracy, or warrior elite, gained power by controlling land and commanding loyalty from local peasants. Religious leaders increasingly influenced political decisions, as bishops and abbots held significant spiritual and temporal authority. Clovis's successors struggled with internal divisions and succession disputes, weakening centralized control over time. Despite this, the Frankish identity and kingdom endured, setting the stage for future expansion under the Carolingians. The blending of Roman administrative legacies and Germanic customs laid groundwork for medieval governance systems. The early medieval period witnessed significant migrations and cultural exchanges, shaping the region's ethnic and linguistic landscape. Christian missionaries worked to convert remaining pagan groups, integrating them into the Frankish realm. The shift from paganism to Christianity transformed societal values, rituals, and art forms. Military tactics evolved, blending Roman legions' discipline with Germanic warrior traditions. Feudal bonds began to form between lords and vassals, precursors to later medieval social structures. The Frankish legal and cultural systems influenced neighboring kingdoms, spreading their impact across Europe. Local dialects and languages started evolving from Latin roots, foreshadowing future Romance languages. Despite instability, the era laid the foundations for medieval France's political and cultural identity. The early Middle Ages was a transformative time, bridging ancient Rome's legacy with the medieval world's dawn. Charlemagne, also known as Charles the Great, became king of the Franks in 768 and dramatically expanded the Frankish kingdom's power and territory. He united much of Western and Central Europe under one rule, establishing what later became known as the Carolingian Empire. In 800 CE, Charlemagne was crowned Emperor of the Romans by Pope Leo III, symbolizing the revival of the Western Roman Empire. This coronation strengthened the alliance between the Frankish monarchy and the Catholic Church, intertwining religious and political authority. Charlemagne's reign saw the Carolingian Renaissance, a revival of art, culture, and learning inspired by classical antiquity. He established schools and promoted literacy, bringing scholars from across Europe to his court at Aachen. Monks and scribes preserved ancient texts by copying manuscripts, safeguarding knowledge through turbulent times. Charlemagne implemented administrative reforms, dividing his empire into counties governed by appointed counts to ensure local order. Missi Dominici, royal agents, traveled to enforce laws and oversee local officials, strengthening central control. The empire was vast, but managing it posed challenges due to its size and diverse populations. Military campaigns secured and expanded borders, defending against Vikings in the north and Muslims in the south. Charlemagne's efforts laid the groundwork for modern France and Germany, influencing future European states. He supported the Church's growth, encouraging the spread of Christianity throughout his territories. Religious uniformity helped unify diverse peoples under Carolingian rule and strengthened cultural cohesion. Legal reforms standardized laws and judicial procedures, promoting stability across the empire. Charlemagne's administration relied on a network of loyal nobles, whose allegiance was vital for maintaining power. The emperor's court became a cultural and intellectual hub, attracting poets, theologians, and scholars. The Carolingian Renaissance revived Latin learning and inspired new developments in art, architecture, and education. Carolingian minuscule, a clear handwriting style, improved communication and document preservation. Despite his successes, Charlemagne's empire faced succession challenges, with divisions among his heirs after his death. The Treaty of Verdun in 843 split the empire into three kingdoms, shaping Europe's political map. These divisions eventually evolved into the foundations of modern European nations like France and Germany. The Carolingian Empire's legacy influenced medieval governance, law, and culture for centuries. Charlemagne is remembered as a unifying figure who bridged ancient traditions and medieval innovation. His reign inspired future rulers to consolidate power and promote learning. The alliance between monarchy and church under Charlemagne shaped medieval European society deeply. Military strength, cultural revival, and administrative reforms marked his transformative rule. The Carolingian period was a golden age in early medieval Europe's history. Charlemagne's impact extended beyond politics, affecting religion, education, and identity. His reign is a defining chapter in the history of medieval France and Europe. Charlemagne's death in 814 marked the end of an era, but his legacy continued to shape European history for centuries. Though the empire fragmented, the ideals of unity and learning endured beyond Carolingian rule. Feudalism became the dominant social and political system in medieval France, organizing society around relationships of land ownership and service between lords, vassals, and peasants. At the heart of feudalism was the grant of land, or fief, from a lord to a vassal, in exchange for loyalty, military service, and support. Kings relied on powerful nobles to govern regions, but these nobles often held significant autonomy and could challenge royal authority. Knights, as heavily armed warriors, played a crucial role in medieval warfare and were bound by codes of chivalry and honor. The manor was the basic economic unit, where lords managed agricultural estates worked by peasants and serfs bound to the land. Serfs were not slaves, but were legally tied to the manor, providing labor and goods in exchange for protection and a place to live. Peasants formed the majority of the population, enduring hard work, heavy taxes, and limited freedoms within the feudal system. The church was a powerful institution influencing all levels of medieval society, owning land and wealth and providing spiritual guidance. Monasteries served as centers of education, charity, and medical care, reinforcing the church's central role in daily life. Towns and cities grew slowly during the early medieval period, but became important centers of trade and craft in later centuries. Guilds formed to regulate trades and protect the interests of artisans and merchants within medieval towns. Feudal lords maintained courts to settle disputes, enforce laws, and collect taxes, exercising judicial authority over their territories. Castles symbolized feudal power and provided defense against external enemies and local conflicts. Life in medieval France was often harsh, with famine, disease, and warfare threatening the population regularly. Social mobility was limited, but some peasants and merchants gained wealth and influence through trade or royal favor. Marriage alliances among nobles secured political power and territorial expansion, shaping feudal relationships and succession. Education was mostly restricted to the clergy and noble classes, with most peasants remaining illiterate. The church influenced social norms, moral behavior, and festivals, providing structure in a turbulent world. The code of chivalry governed knightly conduct, promoting bravery, loyalty, and courtly love ideals. Feudal obligations were reciprocal, but often favored the lords, reinforcing a hierarchical and unequal society. Vassals could have their own vassals, creating complex layers of allegiance and obligation within the feudal pyramid. Military service was central to feudal bonds, with knights required to serve their lords during conflicts. Feudalism was flexible and varied regionally, adapting to local customs and political conditions. Royal power slowly increased over time, as kings sought to reduce noble autonomy and strengthen centralized authority. The Capetian dynasty worked to expand royal domains and assert control over rebellious nobles. The 100 Years' War strained feudal bonds and contributed to the decline of traditional feudal military obligations. New weapons and tactics reduced the importance of armored knights on the battlefield, changing medieval warfare. Trade expansion and urban growth offered alternatives to feudal agrarian life, altering economic and social structures. Despite hardships, medieval society developed a rich culture of art, literature, and religious devotion. Feudalism shaped medieval French life, creating a structured but unequal society defined by loyalty, land, and service between kings, nobles, knights, and peasants. Despite its rigidity, feudalism allowed for local governance and defense during a time of frequent conflict and instability. The intertwined roles of the church and nobility provided order, culture, and spiritual meaning to medieval communities. Over time, changing political, economic, and military factors gradually weakened feudal bonds and aristocratic dominance. Emerging towns and a growing merchant class began to challenge feudal norms and expand new opportunities. Royal efforts to centralize power slowly eroded noble independence, paving the way for modern nation-states. Feudal society's legacy persists in legal traditions, land ownership concepts, and cultural memories in France and beyond. Understanding feudalism is crucial to comprehending medieval politics, economy, and daily life in Europe. Though imperfect, feudalism provided stability in a fragmented world and influenced Europe's long historical trajectory. This complex social system laid the foundation for future transformations that shaped France's development through the Renaissance and beyond. The Capetian dynasty began in 987 with Hugh Capet's election as King of France, marking the start of a new royal line that would strengthen and unify the fragmented kingdom over centuries. Hugh Capet's initial power was limited, ruling only around Paris, but his dynasty's careful strategy gradually expanded royal influence across France's feudal territories. The early Capetians relied on alliances with powerful nobles and the church to legitimize and support their fragile authority. One key strategy was securing the succession through primogeniture, ensuring the eldest son inherited the throne and reducing disputes over royal succession. Capetian kings also worked to extend direct royal control by acquiring lands and weakening rebellious nobles' power. The monarchy's growing prestige was closely tied to its role as protector and supporter of the Catholic Church. French kings gained influence through coronation ceremonies in Reims Cathedral, symbolizing divine approval of their rule. The Capetians established the Parlement of Paris, a royal court that helped centralize legal authority and administer justice. Over time, royal officials, such as bailiffs and seneschals, were appointed to enforce the king's laws in provinces. Capetian kings gradually absorbed rights once held by nobles, expanding their judicial, fiscal, and military control. Territorial expansion was achieved through marriage alliances, treaties, and sometimes military conquest, increasing royal domains. The acquisition of the rich region of Île-de-France around Paris solidified the monarchy's economic base. Philip II Augustus, R. 1180–1223, was a pivotal ruler who strengthened royal power and reclaimed lands from the English crown. Philip II expanded French territories by successfully defeating King John of England in the Battle of Bouvines, a turning point for French sovereignty. Under Louis IX, later canonized as Saint Louis, the monarchy promoted justice, religious devotion, and fairness, enhancing royal legitimacy. St. Louis reformed the legal system, creating royal courts that provided an alternative to feudal justice. The Capetians built and improved royal castles and administrative centers, showcasing their power and protecting their domains. Royal taxation systems evolved to fund armies and administration, reducing dependence on feudal levies. The growth of towns and commerce under Capetian rule brought wealth and new social classes into the political sphere. Kings negotiated with emerging urban centers, granting charters that fostered economic growth and royal authority. The Capetians faced challenges from powerful nobles like the Dukes of Normandy and Burgundy, whose independence threatened royal ambitions. Royal diplomacy and military campaigns were used to subdue rebellious vassals and secure loyalty. The Hundred Years' War tested Capetian and later Valois monarchs' ability to maintain control over France. Despite setbacks, the monarchy emerged stronger, unifying France politically and culturally over the long term. Capetian rule saw the gradual transformation from feudal fragmentation toward centralized governance and national identity. The relationship between monarchy and church remained fundamental, with kings defending and promoting Catholicism. The rise of the French language and culture under Capetian patronage helped forge a shared identity among diverse populations. Royal ceremonies, art, and architecture emphasized the king's sacred and political authority. The development of a professional bureaucracy allowed the monarchy to administer justice, finance, and military affairs more effectively. Capetian monarchs cultivated alliances with European powers through strategic marriages and diplomacy. The dynasty's endurance laid the foundation for modern France's political and cultural unity. Studying the Capetians reveals the complex process of state-building amid medieval Europe's competing powers. Their legacy influenced subsequent French kings and shaped European monarchy models for centuries. The Hundred Years' War, spanning 1337 to 1453, was a prolonged conflict between England and France over territorial claims and the French crown's succession. The war began when Edward III of England asserted his claim to the French throne, challenging the Valois dynasty's legitimacy. Early battles, such as Crécy in 1346, showcased the effectiveness of English longbowmen against heavily armored French knights. The Battle of Poitiers in 1356 resulted in the capture of the French king John II, weakening French morale. The Treaty of Bretigny in 1360 temporarily halted fighting, but failed to resolve the underlying conflicts between the kingdoms. The war resumed with fluctuating fortunes as both sides gained and lost territories in a series of campaigns. The Black Death's devastation impacted both nations, complicating recruitment and economic stability during the war years. Joan of Arc emerged as a key figure, claiming divine guidance to support Charles VII and inspire French resistance. Her leadership helped lift the siege of Orléans in 1429, turning the tide in favor of the French. Joan's capture and execution in 1431 galvanized French determination despite her tragic fate. French military innovations, including the use of cannons and professional armies, gradually eroded English advantages. The English suffered significant defeats, losing control over much of their French territories by the war's end. The conflict fostered a growing sense of national identity in both England and France. The war devastated regions of France, destroying towns, farms, and disrupting everyday life for civilians. Noble families on both sides were deeply involved, with shifting alliances and internal conflicts influencing the war's course. The rivalry intensified political and cultural divisions between England and France, with long-lasting repercussions. Economic strains led both kingdoms to impose heavy taxes and raise loans to finance military campaigns. Chivalry and medieval warfare evolved, with changing tactics and technology affecting battlefield outcomes. The war's end in 1453 marked the rise of centralized monarchies in both countries. France's victory solidified the Valois monarchy and restored royal control over much of its territory. England's loss led to internal conflicts, including the Wars of the Roses, weakening its monarchy. The Hundred Years' War influenced the development of modern nation-states by fostering national loyalty and centralized governance. Military developments during the war foreshadowed the decline of feudal knights and the rise of professional armies. The conflict's legacy impacted European diplomacy, warfare, and culture for centuries. Medieval chroniclers and later historians have extensively studied the war, highlighting its significance in shaping Europe. Art, literature, and folklore, including stories of Joan of Arc, immortalized the conflict in popular memory. The war's complex causes included dynastic disputes, economic interests, and territorial ambitions, reflecting medieval power struggles. Both England and France experienced social changes as a result, including shifts in the role of nobility and commoners. The war tested the resilience of medieval societies, demonstrating the devastating impact of prolonged conflict. Peace treaties and diplomatic efforts during and after the war shaped future European alliances and rivalries. The Hundred Years' War remains one of medieval Europe's defining and most studied conflicts. Its lessons on warfare, leadership, and national identity continue to resonate in historical scholarship today. Religion was central to life in late medieval France, influencing politics, education, art, and daily customs throughout the kingdom. The Catholic Church was the dominant spiritual authority, shaping moral values and social norms across all classes. Monasteries and cathedral schools preserved knowledge, educating clergy and some nobles, while promoting religious devotion and scholarship. Gothic architecture flourished during this era, with magnificent cathedrals like Notre Dame de Paris showcasing intricate design and spiritual symbolism. The Church played a key role in legitimizing royal authority and mediating conflicts between nobles and kings. Pilgrimages to holy sites became popular, connecting France to wider European religious networks and fostering cultural exchange. Religious festivals and saints' days punctuated the calendar, offering communal celebrations and relief from daily hardships. Mysticism and new religious movements emerged, challenging traditional church doctrines and foreshadowing future reforms. The Black Death devastated France in the 14th century, profoundly affecting population, economy, and religious beliefs. Many sought explanations through faith, while others questioned church authority due to its inability to prevent the plague. The late Middle Ages saw increased persecution of Jews and heretics, fueled by religious intolerance and social tensions. Universities grew as centers of learning, encouraging theological debate, philosophy, and the study of law and medicine. Scholars like Thomas Aquinas influenced religious thought, integrating Christian doctrine with classical philosophy. The arts flourished with religious themes dominating painting, sculpture, and music, reflecting spiritual devotion and church patronage. Illuminated manuscripts and stained glass windows were crafted with painstaking detail to inspire worshippers. Courtly literature and poetry often blended secular and religious themes, exploring love, morality, and chivalry. Chivalric ideals were closely tied to religious values, emphasizing honor, loyalty, and protection of the weak. The church's wealth and land holdings made it a powerful political player, sometimes clashing with royal interests. Conflicts such as the Avignon Papacy and the Western Schism weakened church unity and credibility. Despite challenges, the church maintained influence through local parishes and the sacraments, integral to everyday life. Late medieval France experienced social changes, including the rise of townspeople and merchants gaining wealth and influence. Guilds regulated crafts and trade, contributing to urban economic growth and community identity. Popular religious movements, like the Devotio Moderna, emphasized personal piety and inner spirituality. The Hundred Years' War's devastation fostered both despair and renewed religious fervor among the population. Royal patronage of religious institutions helped consolidate political power and demonstrate piety. The coronation of French kings by the Church reinforced the divine right to rule. Religious orders such as the Franciscans and Dominicans engaged in preaching and education, spreading church teachings. The printing press's invention near the end of the Middle Ages began transforming knowledge dissemination and religious ideas. Late medieval France laid foundations for the Renaissance, blending medieval spirituality with emerging humanism. Cultural and religious shifts during this period set the stage for the Reformation and modern European history. Understanding this era reveals how faith, art, and politics intertwined to shape French society. The late Middle Ages were a time of transformation, resilience, and enduring religious influence in France. The late Middle Ages in France were marked by deep religious devotion that influenced every aspect of life, from governance to daily customs. shaping a society rooted in faith. Despite crises like the Black Death and church schisms, religious institutions remained central, offering spiritual guidance and social stability to a population seeking meaning and order. Gothic cathedrals stand today as magnificent testaments to medieval faith and artistic achievement, reflecting both religious fervor and technical innovation of the era. Religious festivals and rites brought communities together, reinforcing social bonds and providing relief from the harsh realities of medieval life. The Church's political power sometimes conflicted with the monarchy's ambitions, but both forces shaped France's evolving national identity and governance. Universities and religious scholars preserved and expanded knowledge, setting intellectual foundations that bridged medieval traditions and the coming Renaissance. The rise of towns and merchant classes introduced new economic dynamics, gradually shifting power balances and social structures in late medieval France.